It was an unusually cold morning in a small American town called Millfield. The streets were quiet, except for the hum of engines from passing trucks and the faint whistle of the wind sweeping through Main Street. Near the corner of a worn-down diner, a homeless man named Earl sat wrapped in a torn blanket, his hands trembling from the chill. He hadn't eaten in 2 days, but the smell of fresh coffee drifting from the diner gave him hope. Earl slowly stood up and walked toward the back alley, hoping someone might spare him a few coins. Inside the diner, people were chatting, sipping coffee, and trying to escape the cold. A police cruiser pulled up nearby, and Officer Grant, a man in his late 40s with a reputation for being strict and often cruel, stepped out. He'd been on the force for 20 years, but kindness wasn't one of his badges. When Grant saw Earl, his face tightened with disgust. "Didn't I tell you to stay away from this place?" he barked. "I'm sorry, sir," Earl replied softly, avoiding eye contact. "I just wanted to ask if someone could spare a cup of coffee." Grant's patience snapped. "You people never learn," he shouted and shoved Earl backward. The homeless man stumbled, nearly falling into a pile of trash bags. When Earl raised a hand to steady himself, Grant mistook it as defiance and slapped him hard across the face. The sound echoed down the alley. A few customers inside the diner gasped, but none dared to intervene, except for one man sitting by the window. That man was Jack Turner, a biker with a heavy beard, leather jacket, and a calm but commanding presence. He was a former Marine, someone who had seen too much injustice both on the battlefield and at home. He had stopped at the diner for breakfast with his bike club, the Iron Brotherhood, but what he just witnessed made his blood boil. Jack stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. "What the hell was that?" he muttered, pulling on his gloves. He walked outside, the roar of his Harley-Davidson echoing through the street as he started it up. From across the road, Jack watched Officer Grant grip Earl by the collar. The homeless man begged, "Please, sir, I didn't mean anything. Before Earl could finish, Grant shoved him again. That was the moment Jack decided he'd seen enough. He revved his engine, loud enough for everyone nearby to turn their heads. The officer looked up, startled. Jack pulled his bike to the curb and dismounted, his boots crunching against the gravel. "You think slapping a hungry man makes you a hero?" he said, his deep voice cutting through the cold air. Grant froze, unsure how to respond. People began stepping out of the diner, watching the confrontation unfold. Jack's eyes locked onto the officer's badge, and his jaw clenched. "Let's see how tough you are," he muttered. Something was about to change in Millfield that morning, something that would make headlines across the country. "Officer," Grant's face turned pale as the biker walked toward him with steady, intimidating steps. The street had grown silent. Only the faint hum of Jack's idling Harley could be heard. The homeless man, Earl, stood frozen, one hand on his bruised cheek, disbelief written all over his weathered face. "Step back, sir," Grant ordered, trying to sound firm, but his voice wavered. Jack didn't flinch. "No, I've seen enough," he said calmly. "You wear that badge to protect people, not to beat them down." People started gathering outside the diner, phones raised, recording the scene. The once quiet street was now filled with murmurs and camera clicks. Jack stood face to face with the officer, his broad frame casting a shadow over the trembling cop. "Apologize to him," Jack said, nodding toward Earl. Grant's lips tightened. "You can't tell me what to do." Jack's eyes narrowed. "Maybe not. But the world can." Within minutes, 3 more Harleys roared down the street. Members of the Iron Brotherhood, men and women in leather jackets bearing the club's insignia, parked their bikes beside Jack. Their arrival made everyone's eyes widen. Grant took a nervous step back as the bikers dismounted, forming a loose circle around him and the homeless man. Earl looked terrified, but Jack gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're safe now, brother," he said softly. Then he turned to one of his friends. "Tom, grab him some food." Tom nodded, heading into the diner. Grant pulled out his radio. "You're interfering with police business," he snapped. Jack smirked. "Oh, really? Then explain to your chief why this business is being live-streamed to half the town." He pointed to a teenager nearby holding up his phone. You just assaulted an unarmed man for being hungry. Let's see how the department feels about that." Grant's confidence drained away. He muttered something under his breath and backed toward his cruiser. But before he could get in, Jack spoke again, his tone softer this time. "You know, man, once I wore a uniform too. We fought for people who couldn't fight for themselves. What happened to you?" Grant froze, his hand trembling on the car door. The weight of Jack's words and the watching crowd was too heavy to ignore. When the police chief arrived minutes later, the crowd erupted with shouts and demands for justice. The chief listened quietly as witnesses replayed their videos. After watching the footage, he turned to Grant and said coldly, "Badge, now!" Grant's shoulders slumped. Slowly, he removed his badge and gun, handing them over. The chief ordered him to go home, pending investigation. Jack handed Earl a bag of food and an envelope with a few $100s. "Get a warm meal and a bed tonight," he said. Earl's eyes filled with tears. "Why would you help me?" Jack smiled. "Because everyone deserves respect, especially when the world forgets them." Later that day, the video went viral across social media. News stations replayed the footage under headlines like, "Biker confronts cop after homeless assault." At the police station, officers who once admired Grant sat in silence. One whispered, "That biker did what we should have done." And out on the open road, Jack and his brothers rode again, engines roaring, hearts full, reminding America that true strength comes from standing up for what's right.